Paul could grant 3 wishes to 3 different men. The sergeant had received the paw after the first man heard his 3rd and final wish. He wished for death. No! The windows shook, the chimney made a howling sound, and rain hit the roof hard. Mr. and Mrs. White sat by the fire with their son, Herbert. They were waiting for a visitor. Finally, someone knocked at the door. Mr. White opened it and welcomed his old friend, Sergeant Major Morris. The sergeant told the family many exciting stories from his travels in faraway countries. Then Mr. White asked about a special object the sergeant had mentioned earlier. Slowly the sergeant took it out of his pocket. It was a dried monkey's paw. He explained that a holy man had given the paw its power to teach people a lesson about changing their fate. The paw could grant 3 wishes to 3 different men. The sergeant had received the paw after the first man heard his 3rd and final wish. He wished for death. Herbert asked why the sergeant had not used his own wishes. The sergeant looked uncomfortable and simply said that he had used them. Suddenly he threw the paw into the fire. Mr. White cried out and quickly took it back out, even though the sergeant warned him. Mr. White convinced his friend to give him the paw. After the sergeant left, Herbert joked that his father should wish for money to pay off the rest of their house. Mr. White laughed and wished for £200. But as soon as he said the words, he screamed in fear. No! The paw had moved and curled in his hand. The family said good night and went to bed. Later, Mr. White sat alone, looking at the fire. The dying flame seemed to change into burning faces in front of him. He reached for a glass of water to make the vision disappear. As he did, his hand lightly touched the monkey's paw. The next morning, the sunlight made them feel much better. The family laughed together about the paw's supposed magic. Herbert left for work. Mr. and Mrs. White spent the day normally. But as evening came, Mrs. White noticed a man standing at their gate. He seemed to be deciding whether to come in. She invited him inside, and he gave them terrible news. Herbert had died in an accident at the factory. He had been caught in the machines. The man continued, saying that the company would give them money as compensation. The amount was £200. The Whites were horrified. They buried Herbert in a cemetery near their home. In the 10 days that followed, the house felt cold and heavy with sadness. One night, while Mr. White tried to comfort his crying wife, she suddenly sat up. She had an idea. They still had the monkey's paw, and Mr. White had 2 wishes left. he could wish for their son to come back to life. Mr. White was terrified by this thought. He imagined Herbert's broken body coming back to life after 10 days in the ground. But Mrs. White would not give up. She hurried him downstairs to find the paw. Because his wife was so desperate, Mr. White took the paw and wished for Herbert to be alive again. Then he let the paw fall to the floor. At first, nothing happened. Mr. White felt a little relieved. He started to believe that the paw was just an ordinary object and that his son's death was only a sad coincidence. But when he lit a candle, the wind blew it out. A moment later, he heard a light tap at the door. The sound grew louder and louder until it became a heavy knock. Mr. White tried to stop his wife. She ran to the door. Her hands were shaking and she had trouble opening the lock. She begged her husband for help, but Mr. White was on the floor searching wildly for the monkey's paw. The knocking became faster and stronger. With one last effort, Mrs. White screamed and pulled the lock open. At that moment, Mr. White found the paw and forced out his third and final wish. The door opened. Outside, there was only the empty, lamp-lit street. A cold wind blew into the house. So what do you think happened? Who was knocking on the door? And why was there no one there when the door was opened? I'd like to know your ideas and suggestions. Please write them in the comments below. And don't forget that there is a full PDF that you can download. You will find the link in the description, which has the full vocabulary and lots of extra activities for you to learn further from this story. Okay, I'll see you in the next lesson.